Welcome to The Lead Creative. In this first episode of Season 4, we ask a legend of the big and small screen, an actor, a director, a playwright, and an icon of theatre, how does your work live on for generations? Sello Maake kaNcube has shared his work with the world from a time when there were only a handful of TV channels and remains relevant today when we have near endless media platforms. We'll discuss his thoughts on storytelling, his creative process, and how you can remain relevant in your field. This is The Lead Creative. Please share this episode with your network, spread the love, and subscribe. Mr. Sello Maake kaNcube, thank you so much for making the time. What an honor
It's
to have
only
you
a
on the
pleasure,
show with us.
Mogezi. It's only a pleasure, and whatever. Hi to your to your viewers or to your followers. Yes.
Thank you so much. So just to start things off, when you started your career just
Yeah.
over 40 years ago, the world was a lot more traditional
Yeah.
than it is today. There were limited career paths, and you would have had to blaze a trail and chart a course really for yourself to end up where you are today. How did you stay on that path to become the industry icon that we know you to be
Hey,
today?
look, man. I think it's first and foremost, you're actually driven by love. By a love of what you're doing. And but it doesn't come easy. There are trials and tribulations along that path. And I think one thing that I kind of like just stayed on because of love. I mean, I had a 1 year, 1.5 to 2 years break, between what is it, 83, 80, 84 and 85, where I actually, like had to find a little bit of unemployment, and I got a job as an order clerk, but I couldn't stay long. you know, the bug had already bitten me. And so over the weekend, one day, I hear about auditions happening at the Market Theatre, and went to the market, and auditioned. And after the audition, they told me that, well, we would like to work with you, but you said you are working, And I said, well, when are you starting rehearsals? And they said on Monday. And I said, well, on Monday I will be here. And on Monday, instead of going to work, I went to rehearsals. And
And
that was
that
it.
and that
You know what I
changed
mean?
the
But I
course
think,
of your
the
life.
one thing that has made me to stay on, and it has just been love of what I do. And I love acting with all my heart. I mean, going into writing is just because, I think there is a need to tell stories, and in our own way. And that's what got me into the writing and directing, I think, as far back as 1997, you know. And back, yeah, it started 1996. And I worked with one director who had a huge influence on me, and he passed on in 1995. And when he passed on, man, I was shattered. I was extremely
Yeah,
shattered, and
yeah, yeah.
you know, because I had vowed that I was going to like work so close to him and just become his protege. I mean, I had actually said I was just going to, shadow him for the better part of, after we, and the play that after the play that we were doing. And I was basically even in the
Yes.
last play that he directed, you know. And after that, now it is time to take on the baton and not, wait for anything. And that's what got me into writing and then directing.
Now, and fast forward
Yes.
to today, your work on stage, on screen, and other initiatives that you're part of has touched and inspired
Hmm.
many South Africans and many people
Yeah.
across the world. And, after 40 years in the industry, do you ever step back and see how your work connects the people and
Hmm.
stories that it touches? Do you almost, because after having been in the industry for as
Hmm.
long as you have, are there any moments where you almost like see the puzzle pieces coming together in front of you of how the work connects
Look, I
people?
mean, I think, I always say to people that I am what I am because of you, you know, and especially when, I mean, television is the one that basically like opens you up to the world, you know. And I mean, with the fames that came, or the notice that came with what you call it, Bophelo ke Sempe, whole generations, because that's where basically it really started. Not even before, because before I did the Bophelo ke Sempe, I did a series called Di Wela Makgolela. You know, I mean, I think that's where the notice basically like started from on television, and then it grew with Bophelo ke Sempeho, and it mushroomed with generations, you know. And I think the humbling thing, and I want to, I don't know whether what you mean about the pieces, coming together,
Yes,
but
yeah.
or the effect that the work that I was doing, and I was just always humbled by just when people recognize you. Like sometimes what you would find is that you would be walking, on the pavement or on the streets, and another person is walking, coming opposite you, and you can see, I mean, not that
Yeah.
you're concentrating on them, but you can see that this person is in their own
Yes.
world and maybe dealing with their own issues, you know but the moment they recognize me, and you just see this person blossom in front of you, and my words is actually when they say, "Oh, ngibone wena namhlanje ngiyowina iLotto." you know. And then later on, I said, "Well, if ever you're going to win it, I'm going to win it too." So ngoba nawe kusho ukuthi uphethe yakho inhlanhla,
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. I know that last year as well as this year you've been celebrating a number of milestones in terms of your social media following,
Yes,
the
yes.
growth that's been happening there. And just touching on that, if you were starting out today with the access that we all have to
Yeah.
digital platforms, and you were, let's take it back to the 80s and say you are starting all over again, how would you start your career differently
I
today?
think what I would do is that today I would actually make sure that I go and study the craft of acting, because I never had the opportunity of actually of I don't have any formal training as an actor. It is basically something that I kind of loved, and then it exuded out of me. But yeah, that's what I would, first and foremost, I would make sure that when I come into the business, I have studied, you know, um, the craft, the acting craft, and just have a full knowledge of what is happening in the industry. You know, even though, I mean, like, one thing that I've discovered is that, I mean, people who come out of the institutions, I don't think they are kind of like equipped enough, in how to deal, with them, with the profession, when they come into the industry, you know. But yeah, I think I would make sure that I go and study, because at least when you come out of study, you have worked in I would say, sort of friendly environment, where
Yes.
you made mistakes, and but you knew that you are still protected. For me, it was basically like out of the, what is it, out of the pan into the fire. You know what I
Into the
mean?
fire.
While I was still
Sure,
trying to
sure,
cook,
sure.
hey, I was in the fire and I was being bribed, you know, by you know, being observed and being reviewed. Hmm.
Right, right. Now, as a director, a playwright, somebody who follows talent, who also cultivates some of this talent for your work and in your work as well. Do does social media in any way play an important role in how the work kind of spreads or how the work reaches people? Because I think just before you answer, I just want to go. I think I just want to go back to the time when you started again, because I mean, we come from a time when there were a handful of TV channels. We
Exactly.
come from a time when traditional media was the only way to go, into a time today where we have endless platforms to share work, and in some instances your following is bigger on some platforms than some media channels. Has it helped in any way to fill seats in theaters, to improve how
You
the
know, it
work
is
spreads?
hard to tell. It is hard to tell. But maybe for now, it is hard to tell. But I know, for instance, because I really became, like social media active. I think I would say maybe just in the past year. You know, I was present, but I wasn't really as present as I am now. You know, and and I remember, I think the last time I did a play, before I did this one, Nothing But the Truth, was in 2017. You know, and the show was a sold out, and I think it was there for me. I would attribute it to the fact that it had to do with my television notice, because people know about my work, and I have that large following from television, you know. But I think now with this play, it is actually a combination for me that you'll
Yes,
find, and by the way, today is International Social Media Day, the day we do our recording. you
absolutely.
know
Yes.
so yeah, and today, I mean, I think it's a combination now of maybe my having the notice, and then also social, the presence that is on social media. And because I've had people who came to the theater who basically were just following me on social media and had never come and seen a
Yes.
play before. And I think, before I would have those that would come to see me because of Archie fame. You know what I mean? But now I had people generally say,
Yes.
and I saw your this thing, I saw your play on social media, and that is why I came. So social media really plays a very, and that, I mean, in the olden days, it was just word of mouth, basically. Yeah, it was just
That's
word of
true.
mouth. And,
Yes.
basically, social media is actually word of mouth, but sometimes in pictures and, in written. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it's written social,
Yes.
a
Yes.
written word of mouth. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. You've already mentioned the role that TV played in how much your work and in how much your work sort of reached people and how
Yeah,
people kind of reacted thereafter. I just want to get into a little bit more detail around that, more so the character of Achimoroka from
yeah,
Generations, because that's where a lot of us, including myself, started to really see your work on a
right,
day-to-day
right.
basis, kind of being
Hmm.
brought to us. How much did that contribute to the mass appeal that you then had after? If you could almost think back to the time, say, before Generations and after Generations, and sort of how the appeal grew
Hmm.
in theater outside of TV. Did
I
that make a
think it
dent?
did. I think it did, and also, I would, I think it did, but I never had enough time to actually, take that in. Because as I, like, I think the whole thing was rising. Then I left Generations, and then I left the country. I went to, what you call it. I went to the UK to do The Lion King. You know, yeah, and but the effect of that, I felt it even more when when I came back. After 5 years, and I was still like, being called Archie, Archie, Archie. excuse me, in 2007. And even now, there's still Archie, 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 and one can just say, and the impact of that was just too massive. You look at, I mean, and also, what was interesting, it was across racial lines, you know. Yeah, because I
Right.
mean, I would go into, like, let's say, the so-called colored area. Hey, Archie, yeah, generation. So, and you go even
Yeah.
in an Indian environment, white people, one cannot tell, because it was just the basic, like, well, as we were getting into the new dispensation, you know what I mean? And they were kind of very
Yes.
reserved, but in the theater space, I think, white people who were coming to the theater were the ones who were more open to the world, because people who would go to the market theater, people or white people that you'd more classify as liberals, always, open to,
Yeah.
to mix with other races, but the theater community is a very small one compared to the television community.
This episode is sponsored by the digitally led customer experience agency Roger Wilco. For all your customer experience, digital marketing, and web development needs and insights, go to rogerwilco.co.za or rogerwilco.co.uk. You can also download the South African Digital CX Reports and the South African Township CX Report directly from their site, free of charge. Don't we all love free insights every now and again? Now back to the show. Speaking of your work in the UK and abroad, in your experience telling stories throughout the world, how do you find audiences receive artistic work from Africa? In the sense that, are we telling our stories enough? Are we
Mm.
telling them confidently? And are we telling them
I think in
well
the
to these
theater, in the
audiences?
theater space, we are doing a good job. You know, I'm not too sure about what we do on television. You know what I mean? Because I think, if you look at, most of our television, we are, I think, just representing our human condition in a very, man, we are criminals and whatever, and whereas, when one has to look at where we come from our history, is that we were always suppressed and looked down upon, and viewed as, people who maybe are of less intelligence, and I think, and when you look at our, television shows, most of them that actually get traction are those that are, or even given, um, expression, are the ones that are dealing with crime, and
Right.
we come from um, a nation of people who were intellectuals. I mean, the Nelson Mandelas were intellectuals. Actually, I always say, make a joke and say they were the Model Cs of the time. You know, and even also, even before that, I mean, before the Mandelas, we have, like, intellectuals, that lived in the early 1900s and
Yeah.
even in the, late 1800s. At the moment, I'm going to be working on a project that talks about the very first black lawyers, or in South Africa. And that story comes out of the Tembeka Ngcukayi Toby book called "The Land Is Ours," and you realize that we had intellectuals, who basically, lawyers who actually used the law to try and fight for the land, you know, and these are the people who are the forefathers, and the creators, or people who have actually created the foundation of the constitution that we are having now. So you got to realize that we are people who actually had a good sense, and a good head over their shoulders, that how white people looked at us doesn't define us, you know and but also what that book
Yes.
does, it actually shows how the dispossession of land led us to be where we are now, being a people that almost like don't have a sense of pride, people that don't have a sense of ownership, and the land dispossession basically, made us the perpetual laborers that we actually seem to be at the present moment.
I'm getting
Hmm.
two things out of that. I'm getting a number of things, but the two I think that
Hmm.
that are there are that the one is that the story that we seem to be putting out there, especially on TV and small screens, tends to be one-sided, or at least shows a
Hmm.
single facet rather than the multifaceted
Absolutely.
people that we are. And I think that leads me and I think that leads me to this question of whether the stories we tell are kind of determined but by what's on demand on these channels or whatever platforms we put them on. Is it governed by that quite a lot, and should that change in any way,
I think,
in your view?
honestly speaking, and speaking, truth to power, it is because, you know, we are not in control of the media. You know what I mean? All these platforms, in one way or the other, the powers that be, are not concerned about how we should see ourselves as a nation. But we cannot blame the powers that be somehow. I mean, we just come out of 30, I mean, we are almost reaching 30 years of the new dispensation, and I think basically that kind of situation should have been changed by those who we have placed in positions of power, and who should have actually taken the time to make sure that we recalibrate our own in and the image that we have about ourselves, you know but that wasn't done. I mean, I look at situations like, for instance, the Afrikaner Broederbond. You know, the Afrikaner Broederbond was established what in 1918, and what was behind the formation of the Afrikaner Broederbond? It was all about the upholding of Afrikaner culture and Afrikaner language. You know what I mean? And while they were consolidating their culture and their language, you know, and that gave them a sense of self. And in the process of
Sure.
doing that, then they actually worked themselves towards power. And in 1948, the Afrikaner Broederbond was the engine behind the National Party. And that was done in 30 years. And when you look at us in 30 years, we are nowhere near a clear definition or redefinition of ourselves. You actually see it in pockets, but you don't see us as, you know, um, looking at us as a people that are, walking tall and proud of who we are. I mean, even today, the Afrikaners, bro, you don't mess around with their culture, and they preserve it
Right.
in, jealously. On top of that, we don't do that. And my generation basically, and the one before, which is, your Zumas and your Mbekis and the Ramaphosas. History is going to judge us harshly. But though I think in a way, the former president, Thabo Mbeki, actually, for me, it was like some kind of redemption. I was at the celebration of his birthday party, and he made a very strong statement
Yeah.
about culture and spoke about how it has been ignored. and how the government had ignored and taken, our culture as just singing and dancing, and we are more than that.
Yeah.
We have a language to preserve. I've been, talking, I've knocked on the government doors and spoke to the highest people in authority, the ministers, in the arts and culture department, and just said, especially when I came back from the UK and say, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to train actors to be multilingual, because once you have a language, you have a key to a culture. You know what I mean? And if
Yeah.
also, again, if you want to preserve a
Yes. Yes.
language, you know, you can only preserve it not by writing books, but let it be spoken and let it be seen in performance.
It's letting it sort of thrive in front of people and to
Absolutely.
audiences and to the people it
I'm sure
represents.
there is a Shakespeare play that you've read. You've read. You know what I mean? You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yes.
And
Yes.
because you know a little bit of English, And I also had the opportunity. I've done, for instance, I think professionally, I've done 3 Shakespeare plays. I did Julius Caesar. I did um,
Othello.
Othello, and I did. There's one that is very obscure. It's not done too often. It's called Titus Andronicus. So I've done 3 Shakespeare plays. And when we were doing the Othello, I did it in the UK. When I did Othello, it was the 400th year anniversary of the play, not even Shakespeare, of the play. So the question you ask yourself is, what has made the play to survive for 400 years? It has survived because it was always performed. And they're still performing it using whatever the Elizabethan English. And that is what has preserved, that play and the language, because it has been seen in action. We don't see our own languages in action. And not, where we mix them, or, when we are doing, no, understand. No, no, no. Indaba nje ukuthi and speak pure Zulu, or
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Speaking them
speak them
purely. Yeah.
purely with
Yeah.
all the richness and the beauty that is in our languages. We don't do that. And the people who can help in that preservation would be there, like the performing artist. And for me, the performing artist
Yes.
is
Yes.
like a living custodian, or a custodian of our living culture.
Now, just sticking with this idea of
Yes.
storytelling, just with sort of one last question on this particular theme specifically, with cultures and our lifestyles merging so much across the world, how do we differentiate our stories in comparison to anything else that's out there in the world? Because we are seeing that people are becoming, more and more similar the more you look across the world. And yet at the same time, we want to differentiate and tell our stories uniquely. How do we do that?
There's a writer, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He wrote a book. He's got many books, but I'm just going to mention this too. There's a book that he wrote called Decolonizing the Mind, and how he actually even came to, or what led him to coming to writing that book, as he tells the story, is he had come back from abroad, and he came to his village, and a school teacher in his village came and approached him, and he said to him, I hear you write books. Could you come and help us with our play at school? And that actually made him to think a bit. Here he was, a world-renowned writer, but somebody from his community says, I hear you write books, and that led him to work with the community, and they I can't remember what they called it, like the Kimaruti Community Theater, and created plays, and that led him to writing this book called Decolonizing the Mind, which is basically a book compilation of essays of the process, that he was, engaged in when he was working with the community. And then, he wrote a sequel to Decolonizing the Mind, calling it Moving the Center. And basically like moving the Eurocentric to, the Afrocentric center, to the Afrocentric, yes.
Right.
And he mentions something very interesting in that book. And he says, universality comes out of locality. What makes us common is that we are the human race. But we are the human
Yes.
race that is living in different parts of the world, influenced by different cultures. You know, we all have we all have the elements that makes us, or that are the components of our human condition, be it jealousy, love, greed, all those characteristics. We all have them, but they manifest themselves in different ways. You know, a
Yes.
thief in the township and a thief in corporate world, they are thieves, but they're working around different circumstances.
They manifest differently.
And that's
Yeah.
what makes the
Yeah.
world interesting. You know, to actually even somehow draw those commonalities, or yes, the commonalities, the similar that we have, how similar we are, but how it seems like, that we are different. You know, I used to remember when we were growing up. I mean, you always hear that, you know, they would say young girls are always going around with these bomakinsa and all those kind of things. Because bomakinsa, they're driving nice cars, or jewelry, and they've got money. But today, I mean, and now today you actually find now the tendapreneurs and
Yes. Yes. Have
have
taken, yeah,
taken,
have taken the lead in
that,
comparison
and it
to,
even
yeah.
goes worse, and the thing that, and for me, it's like you can actually just look at how the human condition works, you know, because, and somehow, it brings a very interesting analysis into the gender dynamics. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If a girl in the township goes for Uma Ginza, you know what I mean? And then, but also there's the tendapreneur, but also there is the millionaires, you know what I mean? And there will be those who would actually want to see themselves around people who've got lots of money, you know. So for me, it is just a way
Yes.
of, the world is just so open, but it has its different stratas, and the stories will always have differences because of the
Yeah.
milieu that they are in, the scenarios that they find themselves
Yes.
in.
And in a way it documents our life. It kind of gives us a
Through
lens
which
through
to look at.
which we live at a particular point in
Absolutely.
time. Yeah. Now, as a legend in your field who has been at it for over 4 decades, can you describe your creative process? I imagine it differs from one to the next. And I think when, someone like me who works in the creative industry looks at someone who is so amazing at what you do, I often wonder what the creative process is behind that, and how you follow that creative process. Because one of the guests we spoke to on the
Mm.
show says, don't steal your creative work, but steal the process that gets
Hmm.
people to how great they are
Yeah.
in what they do. Can you describe your creative process to us?
It's it's to be creative for me. It's actually I have never really sat down and really made an analysis of it. But
Yes.
creativity comes in so many ways. If I am directing, you know what I mean, I will make a plan. Okay, I would like to look at this and I would want to try and, but once you actually start doing, once I'm in the rehearsal room and and there are things that now just comes because they are growing out of something, so for me creativity is, it's like, it is it is work in progress all the time. You know what I mean? And it is only the revisioning, when you revise what you have done, that now you start, trying to put shape onto it. And maybe also what I will say is that somehow what I would do is, I would always say, I work like a sculptor. you know a sculptor takes a block of wood or a block of stone, you know what I mean, and a sculptor, when he works by elimination. If he's going to carve, and then he will be chipping away in order to get the form that he wants, to the form that he sees in his head out of that stone or out
Yes.
of that block of wood. You
Yes.
know what I mean? So for me, it's like at times I work chaotically and then I start eliminating to get the form that I want.
That's very insightful, actually. Yeah, so it's like the chaos in some instances is
The
part of
chaos
the
is part,
process, is
absolutely,
part of
yes.
getting you to, yeah, yeah. Where do you draw your inspiration? How do you draw inspiration? What would you say brings you there, or takes you to that point?
Life, because I'm fascinated by the human condition. I really am fascinated by the human condition. And, my first acting lesson that I got was from my Baba Mnane. He was also an actor. What is it? Worked with Gibson Kenter in a play called Sikalo. You know, and the first acting lesson that he gave me at the age of 15, he broke down the word actor. You know, and he said A stands for action, C stands for creativity, T stands for technique, O stands for observation, R stands for reaction. All these five things you use as an actor, you know. And the most important,
Yes.
and I think for even, I guess, even a writer, the most important thing that an actor has got to learn is observation. You've got to observe life around you, you know and that is how basically that first lesson I have actually taken it forward and analyzed it even much deeper, you know because I looked at that what I appreciate is human behavior, and that is where I draw inspiration from. So the most important thing is that I've got to observe and observe life around me.
Yes.
And then now that observation has got to be, happen in two ways. There is the external, and then there is the internal observation that you have to make. And the internal, it's observing yourself. Where, for instance, if you are in a state of nervousness, you know, for an ordinary person, when they get nervous, they will just be nervous. But for an actor, if you actually experience that sensation of nervousness, you actually almost like, oh, so this is how I am when I'm nervous. And basically, you put record that, and you record that sensation in your brain so that if you are going to be required to play nervousness, you go to the folder of nervousness, you click it and say, and then you play the nervousness.
You step into
Yeah,
that
so
space.
whatever
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
in fact, for an actor and even any creative person, what is normal to people and people take for granted to them, they look into it and interrogate it much deeper.
Yes.
You know, and how, and then, for instance, when you do this internal observation, it is almost like now you are training yourself and fine tuning yourself, because your body is your instrument. You know, when a pianist learns how to play, you know, the piano, you know, an actor has got to learn how to play their body and how to
Right.
execute all those emotions on demand. Because as a musician would play a chord on demand, same the actor, and but that is a rigorous process that I foresee that an actor has got to undergo, and not go into, like these days, you find people say, when I get into character, man, when I get into character. I think that is the biggest BS ever. There's no getting into character. you know a character is defined by actions.
Yes.
I'm the interviewee, you are the interviewer, and anybody just has to observe, and they will see that I am being the interviewer and or the interviewee. I'm basically just answering questions, and you are the interviewer. You are sitting
Yes.
in, so and I've got to drive. I've got to drive this conversation. You, you,
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And
Yes.
I'm just saying, well, I just hope I'm going to answer, give whatever answers, and that's it. you know and so where is getting into character? Because if somebody would, in fact, let's say somebody transcribes this conversation, you asking questions
Yes.
and me answering, are you trying to get into character? No, you are just doing the actions that an interviewer does. I'm just doing the
Yeah. Yeah.
actions that an interviewee does.
Except I had to get into character because I'm talking to a legend, so I had to.
No.
So, so,
Yeah, but am I making
so just to
sense? Am I
switch
making
things. No, you
okay?
absolutely are. You absolutely are. You absolutely are. I think life is your biggest inspiration, and observation the biggest tool to that inspiration. And as a result, understanding yourself and knowing yourself at any point and being able to tap into that knowledge of
Absolutely.
self, that you keep learning from. So as the world changes, because the world has changed a lot since you got into the industry, from TV to digital, and now the growth of streaming. How do you keep yourself relevant? How do you keep yourself relevant in a world where there's so much happening in our lives? There are so many actors, creative people, legends, icons coming and going, and yet you remain relevant. I mean, I was watching a movie on Netflix just the other day that you are in. I'm looking forward to your play in October. So you are certainly relevant in the fabric of society. How do you do that? How do you remain relevant for over 4 decades? So for someone starting today and building their career, how do they maintain that? How do they grow and build that?
You know, be original. Here's something that also, I hear young people talking about it. And you hear a person say, when I'm still working on my brand. I'm still working on my brand. I'm of the view that your brand is formed long before you even know that you are a brand. One's brand is formed the day one's father's sperm meets with their mother's egg. That's when that brand is formed. And that is so definitive through even the DNA. But what makes it even more powerful, you know, because one thing that is constant when you look at life is just the same. It is us who are trying to make it seem like it, it is changing. You know what I mean? But life is just the same. The way a human being or even an animal was conceived 10, 40,000 years ago is still the very same way. Men have, because they observe in the science, which is what I look at also as acting, that acting is a science that can be learned. You know what I mean. So but what manifests
Yes.
that even more is that at the bank, when you go, they would, yeah, you would sign, they will, expect you to sign. But one thing that they would think they trust more than your signature is your fingerprint. And I get
Yeah.
kofana now. There is none like you. That is your brand. What is the meaning of brand? There is no other Coca-Cola. It's just Coca-Cola. So when you are
Yeah.
Monges, there is no another Monges. We may have the same name and even maybe the same surname, but here's something that is going to define us is your fingerprint. And now what I say is, if you
Right.
want to say you are working on your brand, what you are saying is you are almost wanting to manifest the fine print that is on your fingerprint. And that takes one into looking into inwardly into who they are. And who they are will always manifest as long as you stay true to yourself. People try, and your truth will remain your truth. And if you work within your space, I don't try to do things and say I want to be relevant and try and do it. No, I just do what I do because I love it. And out of it,
Yes.
then where that gift is coming from will manifest itself in staying true and focused to the moment.
That's a really insightful point for us to
Hmm.
end off. And I think out of that, I get this sense that authenticity and remaining authentic to yourself, to your art,
Oh,
to your
absolutely.
craft, the love that you give, and how much you almost sort of understand yourself and keep learning is what keeps you relevant. Would that distill it the way that you told
No,
us today?
absolutely, absolutely. Just stay authentic. One of the problems is that people keep looking ukuthi kwenzakala and what's happening, and next door. You know what I mean? No, look
Yes, yes,
inwardly, because even the way you experience things in your own way. God didn't make you different because he doesn't know what he's doing. You have just got to find an experience, or look deep into what is it that makes me different. How do I look at the world, and basically manifest that and exercise that. And as you keep doing something, you get better at it. I would say that is how I reinvent myself.
thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation, and it was an honor to have
Thank
you
you,
with
Mongis.
us.
I enjoyed myself too. Thank you, man. And to your viewers, all the best. Stay true to yourself and stay out of harm's way.